afternoon, or whatever time it is, wherever you are, and welcome to Textile Talks. I am Emma Parker, and I am the project manager at the Quilt Alliance. And I am so excited that you joined us for this presentation of the research and creative projects from our 2026 Ardis James QSOS Scholars. I'm usually pretty excited about our Textile Talks, but I am, as the kids say, super pumped about this one, and I'm really, really excited for you to hear from them. If you're new to Textile Talks, or if you just need a reminder, it is a weekly series presented every Wednesday for free at 2 p.m. Eastern on Zoom by the Quilt Alliance and our three partner organizations shown here, the International Quilt Museum, the Studio Art Quilt Associates, and the Surface Design Association. All Textile Talks are recorded and available by YouTube, and my colleague Lucy will share that link where you can catch up on all the talks you've missed on YouTube. She'll also share a link to the Textile Talks donation page, and you can share your support in any amount. It is always, always appreciated. You and our corporate sponsors make this series possible to catch since 2020 for free. A little bit about the Quilt Alliance specifically, many of you know us, but our mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers, which is no small feat. Our projects include Quilters Save Our Stories, QSOS, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today, which is an oral history project archived with our partners at the Library of Congress and the University of Kentucky. We also have a video quilt documentation project called Go Tell It, and anyone who wants to share a quilt story can participate in that project. To find out more about the Quilt Alliance and our projects, you can visit our website and consider becoming a member or donor. We rely on community support to carry out this important mission. Let's see, a few housekeeping things right here. Let's see, I lost my notes here. Yes. I encourage you to use the Q&A box if you have questions. We'll have time for questions at the end of the talk for our scholars. And you can use the chat box for greeting others. If you have technical issues, you're welcome to send a message to presenters only. If you'd like your message to go to everyone and you want to be part of the larger conversation, you can double check your chat settings by using the little triangle next to the chat button and make sure that it's going to everyone. Otherwise, it will just come to presenters and we may not see your message. If you're trying to send it out and talk to everyone, we have folks here from around the world and we encourage you to have a conversation in the chat. We also have a live captioner here today. If you prefer not to view captions or want to turn them on, you can toggle them off and on by finding the CC or live caption button within your Zoom settings. There will be a survey that will pop up in your browser after we end today, and your comments and suggestions for improvement are really, really appreciated. We really do listen to and read them and try to enact them whenever possible. Before we get started, I have a very quick and exciting announcement. Many of you may have heard that Amy Milne, Executive Director of the Quilt Alliance, and me, Emma Parker, I'm the project manager, are both moving on from the Quilt Alliance after a combined 34 years. We are super excited to announce that the Alliance will be in good hands, though. We have a new interim executive director, Nellie Wu, and I'm really excited. Nellie, let's see, are you here? Yes. Would you like to just say a couple words?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to join this amazing community. I have been a huge fan of Quilt Alliance since the days of Quilters Take Manhattan. I'm native to New York, so the Quilt Alliance has been near and dear to my heart, and so many of my friends and colleagues are part of the membership of Quilt Alliance. So I'm so excited to hear from all of you, and I'm so thrilled to be just helping transition during this period from Emma and Amy and Deb, who've done such an amazing job.
Yeah. Thanks, Nellie. We're super excited you're here. And yeah, you will see Nellie on future Textile Talks, I think. So get ready. I will miss seeing everyone here. It's been a real joy to see many of your names pop up on the screen, even though I can't see you. And I feel like I've gotten to know some of you over the past 6 years, but I hope that I'll see you sometime out in the real world. So it's been really, really a wonderful community to be part of. So I'm not going anywhere. You can't get rid of me. Sorry, Nellie. Um, anyway, all right, now to our regularly scheduled programming. Thank you again, Nellie, for saying hi. Um, Today, we are really excited to feature three projects by the 2026 Ardis James QSOS Scholars. I know that sounds like alphabet soup, but this is a Quilt Alliance project that's really near and dear to my heart and that I'm very excited about. If you have attended a textile talk before, you're probably familiar with our work, particularly QSOS or Quilters Save Our Stories, which is our flagship oral history project. And it's more than 1,200 audio recorded interviews with quilt makers that we have collected over the past 25 years, including famous quilters that you've heard of, and also quilters you've never heard of. There's an interview that's very short with a 6-year-old boy who just finished his first quilt. So it runs the full gamut. And these interviews are archived at the Library of Congress's American Folklife Center. The original recordings and cassette tapes are housed there because the Library of Congress thought, oh my gosh, quilter stories are American stories, although the project is also international. They're not just American stories, and they are important enough to spend our tax dollars preserving. The project is really a gem. Other than the Veterans Oral History Project, we believe that it's one of the largest oral history projects about a specific community recorded by that community. And it's not just any community, right? It's quilters. There's a statistic which I think is a little dubious, but it says that on average, there's one quilter in every 11 American homes. So these interviews offer an amazing window into the experiences of people across the country and across the social spectrum, though we are always working to make the project more diverse. The interviews are about the interviewee's quilt making life, but that's kind of a big holistic view. So it's not just about quilts, it's also about grieving, about spending money, about making money, about what it means to relax, what it means to be creative, and what it means to heal. All of this brings me to the Ardis James QSOS Scholars Program. We realized that we have an incredible collection of interviews, but we really wanted people to use it. So we have invited artists, community organizers, researchers, historians, archivists, writers, anyone interested in sending in a proposal and delving into this collection to explore the interviews and create a project of any kind that responds to or incorporates these interviews. So, with support from the Robert and Ardis James Foundation, we started the Ardis James QSOS Scholars Program. This year is our fourth round, I'm very excited to say, of scholars. We had 2 scholars in 2022, 2 in 2024, 3 scholars in 2017. And I hope that we'll continue to have the chance in the future to have more additional projects. So it's something that you're interested in participating in the future. Do check out our website. We have an interest form that you can fill out there. And when the next round opens, we'll let you know. This year's QSOS scholars have done incredible research into the collection to find some amazing kind of excerpts and data from the interviews, but they've also interpreted it in really beautiful, creative ways, which is exactly what we'd hoped that this project would provide. I hope that you will dig into the collection as well. I'll share a link and anyone can explore it, listen to it, read it. And yeah, I am so excited for you to see these projects. So first up, we have Dr. Jaleesa Wells, who's going to join us and talk about her project. What really stood out to us about Jaleesa's proposal was that it had an attachment to place, which is something that a lot of people talk about in QSOS interviews. But even if you're not attached to the specific kinds of places that she's going to talk about, it also was a really universal, I think we can all understand. And it also combines quilting and a little bit of a spoiler, a game in really interesting ways. And I'm not going to say too much more, but I'm just going to let Jaleesa get started. So let me pull up. I'll go invisible, but welcome. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Emma. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Jaleesa Wells. I'm a craft artist and I'm the founder of Bossy Rainbow, which is my creative studio. And my project is called Moving Mountains. It is an art quilted mountain chess game that I developed as part of my work as one of the scholars. The project began with a simple question around how do you move a mountain? And for me, that question evolved into a larger set of ideas about mountain living, about quilt making, about memory and movement, and the ways that people carry place with them. The work brings together my craft practice and my interest in quilts as narrative objects, as well as the Quilt Alliance Oral History Archive. So I'm going to talk about the art making and the artwork itself and where it came from and how I made it and what it means to me as a tactile, playable textile form. Next slide. So this project began from lived experience as much as it did from research. These are images from my yard in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It's showing the pinnacles, which are up the road from where I live. And I've also lived in and around mountains for years. So I lived in Central City, Colorado, which is in the Front Range of the Rockies. I've lived in Helensburgh, Scotland, which is at sort of the gateway of the Scottish Highlands. And now I live in Berea, which is in the foothills of the Cumberland Plateau in Appalachian, Kentucky. And before I really understood sort of the deeper geological connections between those places, they always felt emotionally linked to me. And living in mountains or near mountains has seemed to almost always coincide with a significant moment of independence in my life. So, one of my favorite things about mountain living, which is what these photos show, is the light and the colors. So, I'm really interested in how a silhouette of the foothills holds the sunrise, as you're seeing this orange sunrise here. How the clouds can gather around peaks on a foggy or a rainy day, like today is a really rainy day. And how the colors of a mountain can shift depending on the time of the day. So that really was a grounding aspect of my project. That shifting quality became an important part of my project because I wanted the mountains to feel dynamic and changeable. Next slide. I was inspired by a past QSOS scholars approach to searching and utilizing the oral histories. So I followed Kyra Hicks' advice on picking a term or a word to search for through the archive. And I focused on mountains as my key search term. And I spent time with quilters who talked about mountains in their lives. I came across Frances Al Smith and Norma Bradley and Laura Nell Goebel's interviews that really resonated with me the most. They spoke differently about sort of shared themes around returning home and belonging, but also color and light and memory. Frances L. Smith spoke about returning to the Smoky Mountains and recognizing her roots. And that made me think about mountains as ancestral places. Norma Bradley described crossing the mountain and feeling there was no words for it, which really resonated with me because some mountain landscapes really do exceed that language and that logic. And Laura Nell Goebel emphasized how her quilts drew directly from what surrounds her in the mountains, which connects with me as landscapes that end up in my work quite a lot of my expressive works. So their unique voices help me explore mountains as lived structures shaped by memory and return in presence. Next slide. So this project helped me to strengthen my textile process and practice. I hand dyed and I hand painted my own fabric, which is something I do in my practice a lot. And I was very intentional about not wanting to create a naturalistic mountain landscape. But I was also creating textiles based on feeling and sensing the different colors that I experience in the mountains and in the world. In my article that I posted, I described my palette as funkadelic and surreal and saturated and unpredictable and unruly because that visual language feels really true to me and my experience of living in the mountains rather than something realistic. The fabrics became a way of marking that emotional and mystic terrain versus like a simple typography. And as such, the mountains in my project are not literal mountains, which we'll see in a second, so much so as they are my feelings and experiences of mountains and the people and textures of the mountains. Next slide. As is a regular occurrence in my artistic and craft practice, I constructed the pieces entirely by hand. I drew out the pieces and created rough templates, which you see in this kind of mess of all these little templates and paper that I had cut out. I measured and cut the pieces by hand, and I hand sewed them using a weaving yarn for big stitch marks. And then I stuffed the pieces with polyfill. this slow making process kept the project in conversation with listening. And I also created a playlist of songs that felt resonant to me of the mountains or that sang about the mountains. And as I was sewing, I was also thinking about the archive, the oral histories. I was thinking about my own memories of living in mountains, and with the idea that mountains are structures shaped by time and drift. I knew that I wanted the stitches to be seen and felt when you're holding them, when you're holding the finished piece. And I wanted to have a kind of ragged, like Raggedy Ann sort of look to them, not something too polished, but something much more playful and crafted. So the pieces are sculptural, but they're also soft and patchworked and symbolic. Next slide. So structurally, I interpreted the traditional chess set into mountain forms. And I was inspired by a work I saw last year of the polymer artist Lisa Matthews, who creates chess sets based on African and Black American symbolic figures and like civil rights leaders. So for mine, I wanted to make my shapes to be reminiscent of different kinds of mountain forms. And I came up with this typology through my research, where the kings became mountain massifs as angular peaks because they move slowly but centrally in the game. They're commanding and they represent the anchor that holds the mountains together. The queens became the peaks because they have the most freedom in the game. They dominate the mountain skylines in real life and they represent the most recognizable vision of the mountains. The bishops became gorges because they are slanted and a bit dramatic and can represent structures of rifts or stark separations between mountain forms since they cut diagonally across the board. The knights became spurs because they jet out diagonally, are directional and quirky in the game, and they represent sort of off-kilter paths of memory and migration. The rooks became ridges of or like a mountain wall because they are stable and they represent the backbone of the mountain range. And of course, the pawns became the foothills because they're numerous and they're humble forms. And they're very approachable and they represent the everyday. So with this symbolism, I was interested in what happens when a familiar game is reimagined through mountain landforms. And the chess language gives the project a system, while the mountain forms interpretation give it a transcendence and symbolism. Next slide. So now thinking about the board, which had to be just as intentionally crafted as the pieces. And this is actually showing the inside of the board. So it's the part that you don't see anymore because now it's all sandwiched and quilted together. But this is showing the inside and the back of the board. In my article, I describe the roots of the board as a patchwork floor of purples and greens and oranges and blues, which builds off of the descriptions in the oral histories on how flowers covered the forest floor. I was drawn to the idea of roots because the archive kept returning me to questions of home and ancestry and belonging. And so the board became that patchwork field of relation, a place where movement happens and also where connection is held. The board supports the action of the game and also carries the deeper ideas of rootedness and return, of crossing over or through the mountains, and the crossover of night and day in color and light. The back of my quilts are almost always as important as the tops to me. So for this game board, I took a rainbow stacked coins approach, and which represents light as a spectrum of color. Next slide. So speaking of color, my color logic stemmed from watching mountains shift through light and dark and night and day. I was interested in the movement from deep blues and purples into oranges, greens, and reds, and playing with how the mountains change colors with the changing of the light. Like if the sun's arc is at a certain point in the day, or the moon's presence makes them darker and bluer and more purple. So I wanted both night and day to live in the work. And I intentionally crafted the colors to feel changeable. The board, as you see here, literally changes from night to day or vice versa, depending on how you're looking at it. The game pieces themselves also change, but not just by light, they also change by color. So depending on how they're arranged on the board or the angle of the player's perspectives, they'll see different aspects of the pieces. That changeability links back to one of the central ideas in the project. Mountains are those dynamic structures that move and they drift and they transform. Next slide. Okay, so then I've created the game. Now we play the game. And so I realized that there could be different ways to play the game. And one of them, of course, is the traditional conquest approach in chess, where you knock pieces off of the board until the king piece is basically cornered or captured. And in some ways, that's kind of true to how mountains form, right? These landforms literally crash into each other, and then they erect these peaks and these plateaus over centuries of time. But I also thought that there was another way in which the players could play the game. And this way would require players to work together to bring the mountains forms together in the center as a way of mending the ancient rift between the mountains. In my studies for this project, I learned that the Appalachian Mountains, the Atlas Mountains, and the Scottish Highlands may have once been connected within the ancient central Pangean mountain system. And so this made me think about how do you move mountains in a way that could symbolize the return of landforms to each other. So in this way, the game can be played as many other sort of piece-related gameplay rules outline, which is by using the same logic of the pieces of how the pieces move and bringing them together and making them work together. In this way, the game is more of a shared puzzle representing connection and belonging and evoking what those oral history interviews were talking about. The gameplay becomes a study on movement and how dynamic structures shift and drift, creating landscapes where people migrate, connect, find home, and carry their stories. And in a way, my game is a reminder that separation and drift are part of a much longer story of relation and reconnection, inheritance, and lineage. Next slide. So that's my presentation about moving mountains. Thank you for listening and for letting me share my project with you. You can find out more about me through my business website, bossyrainbow.com, and across social media. And I've also included my email here if anybody wants to get in touch with me directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a million questions, which I will hold for the end, and I hope that other people will add some to the Q&A as well. But I mean, as someone who used to live in the mountains, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and the way that the colors and the shift could happen within like mere minutes, I think is really, and I love the idea that the pieces can be, no matter where you view them, they're such different colors. So that's really, I thank you so much for sharing that, and really that's one of the things I've noticed about QSOS interviews is everyone ends up talking about where they live because that's oftentimes part of their work and it seeps in a lot of different ways. So we will talk more. I will go ahead and bring our next scholar, Dr. Rachel Ivy Clarke, up. And I had introductions for all of you. I'm gonna hold those in the interest of time, but I encourage everyone to look these folks up, and we can say more about all your qualifications and everything. But I would love to just hear about your project. So I'm gonna stop talking and let you talk.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about myself. Yeah, so this is a project that I've affectionately dubbed the metadata quilt, and I think my project might be a little more sort of meta level than some of the other scholars. Emma, can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm a former librarian, professional librarian, and professor of information science turned textile artist. I've done textile art my whole life, but I'm really interested in the intersection of those two areas. I sort of affectionately call it data quilting, and it's this combination of information visualization, data art, and textiles. I've just put a couple examples of my previous work here. There's a pie chart of like all of the shows to which my work was accepted or rejected. The middle one is a Bargello that is trends in LGBTQ hate crime over time, and that's using data from the US FBI Crime Explorer. And then the third one is actually Pantone color of the year a couple years ago was peach fuzz. So this is built based on data about peach production and consumption in the US, as well as water levels, right? Was it a drought year or not? And I just sort of throw these examples out there to give you some context about the kind of work that I do. Next slide. So I pitched the project to the Quilt Alliance to make a quilt using data from QSOS. I sort of envisioned a block based on each interview and really about the quilters and who they were and what kinds of fabrics and colors and themes and block designs and styles that they made. But spoiler alert, Emma, yeah, it didn't really go that direction. So there's a lot of data in QSOS about the interviewee, like what is their name, what is the date the interview took place, the location, right? We just talked a lot about place, although it's often the location of the interview and not always the location of the quilter. So Emma, the green check is for those. And then I really thought there would be more about the major subjects and themes, and I found that that was not as much. So let's do next. So here's an example, and I really do have to give thanks to Emma because she got me access to sort of what I call the back end of the QSOS database. So here it can see a lot more data, and we call this metadata. This is the data about the interviews themselves. And on the left, you see what we would traditionally call attributes or elements. So title, date, description, subject, creator. And then this is just the blank template that folks use to enter information. The right-hand column would be the values for each of those elements. So all the interviews in the database have a format, but each interview might have a different format. It might be audio, it might be video, it might be a text transcription, so on and so forth. And next, here's just an example of the value data that's in the database for all, there's like 1,300 interviews in the database. So you can see the columns, each interview has a unique identifying number. There's the name of the person being interviewed, the date when it took place, the interviewer, the sponsors, the location, so on and so forth. So this is the kind of data that I'm working with on this project. Next. So as I hinted at, some data elements were more consistently present than others. So for almost every interview, there's an interviewer and an interviewee, which is the quilter. So thank goodness, we'd be lost without that. Almost every interview has a location, but again, sometimes it's the location of the interview and not necessarily the location of where the quilter lives or works. And many took place at sort of transitory events. There's a huge collection of interviews, for instance, from the International Quilt Festival in Houston. Each one has a date. Many of them do have transcripts, which was very useful. Less consistently, again, things like subject or topic is not present for all of the interviews, or the style or pattern of the work. That information is often present, but it's buried within something like the transcript. So for instance, the previous speaker was talking about searching for the keyword mountain. That would be in the transcripts of the interviews. I want to be clear that this is not unusual for any database out there. This is not a critique of the QSOS database. And I actually want to give props because I know a lot of these entries were done by volunteers who might not always have specialized training to do this kind of work. And there's actually quite a bit of data in here considering the circumstances. Next. So I started trying to sketch out a lot of ideas. I was thinking a lot about riffing off ideas like temperature quilts. I was specifically thinking about Nicholas Ball's viral temperature, where he used kind of a blob shape about the feeling that day, and the color of the blob shape would represent the temperature of the day. And I was really thinking about, could I do a blob shape that represented the style or the vibe of the quilt, and the color might represent the location or something like that. And I just kept kind of hitting a wall. Emma, next slide, please. So I was finding things like, okay, I need a unique color for each location. I know there's at least 50 states. I know that there are some international, for instance, there's Georgia, the state in the US, but there's also interviews from the Republic of Georgia, the country. So I was like, oh, I'm going to need like 60 different colors. Or Emma, can you click? Yeah, I started like, could I design little fabrics that have the different shapes of the states or things like that? I was looking at one of the other consistent metadata elements is what collection an interview belongs to. And the collection is really interesting. There are some based around events like the International Quilt Festival. Some are geographically organized, like there's a Delaware collection. Some are quilt guild based, and guilds are sometimes location based and sometimes not. And I was like, well, oh, if I have blue to represent the location Alabama, but then there's Alabama Quilt Guild collection, do I also use a blue fabric? And I was really, really spinning my wheels and kind of getting nowhere. Next. So I was having a conversation with an artist friend of mine. Shout out to Elizabeth Harris of Santa Fe Quilting, because I just kept throwing ideas at her, and she kept giving ideas back to me. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work. I don't have enough colors. I don't have enough fabrics. I don't know what to do. And it was her who finally said to me, she's like, it sounds like the story here is not about the interviews and the content of the interviews themselves. The story is about the data that's in the database and what's present and what's maybe absent or maybe invisible. And that blew my mind. Next. So I started thinking about it in that regard. So we have all these elements, and it's not about what the values are. It's just about whether or not that element has a value for a given interview. Emma, can you click? So I brainstormed this idea. There's about 16 elements that are sort of useful in the database that aren't what we would call administrative metadata, like the last time this file was updated or something like that, that are relevant to the interviews. So I designed sort of this 4x4 grid, and I started saying, okay, if each of these elements is a square in this grid, so maybe the upper right is title. And Emma, if you click, theoretically, it should show like a little X in there, just to say whether it's present or not. It's okay if it's not working.
Sorry
and
about
then
that.
it's okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No. I tried to be fancy in my design, but I should have just gone with my sketches. But basically envisioning a kind of binary. Either this element is present or it's not. So either there's an X or the box is blank. And if you do go to the next slide, you can see I started stitching a prototype with this idea. So I stitched out a grid, and I started saying, okay, if we cordon this off into like a 4x4 squares, there's something in the square or there's nothing in the square. And I started experimenting with some sort of traditional quilting ideas like ties, thinking about cross stitches and what would make sense. And I finally sort of hit on this idea. If you go to the next slide, we'll continue our theme of color here, where I thought, okay, we'll assign each of these elements a color, and there'll be 16 elements. Each will have a unique color, and if that color is present, stitched in the square for that interview. So I kind of ordered these elements in the order that, this is totally subjective and arbitrary, but that I thought was most useful and important. So the interviewee, right? And every interview that I have found so far has an interviewee, otherwise probably wouldn't exist. So if there's an interviewee, they will get a white stitch in the upper left-hand square. The date of the interview, again, almost universally present. So the next square over would get this silver stitch, a stitch in a silver color for the interview date. If the interview has a description attached to it, then it would get a stitch in gray, and so on and so forth. And so I prototyped just a couple examples to show you. Emma, if you go to the next slide. This is the record for, this is, as far as I know, the not necessarily the earliest interview, but the earliest interview added to the database. Virginia Abrams. And Emma, if you click, there should be a little picture, yes, of the stitching for this particular database record. So you can see the different colors represent the different elements, and you can see that there are empty boxes that show that there isn't necessarily a metadata value for that element for this particular interview. And then I tried to pick one. If you go to the next one, kind of one in the middle, and if you click again, you can see that this one has some of the same elements, but is also maybe missing more of the elements. And then finally, one more. This is a very recent one for Bisa Butler. And if you click again, you can see sort of my prototype. This one is missing maybe even more elements. And again, not a critique, not a bad thing. Some of this happens for a variety of reasons that the metadata might be stored elsewhere, and sort of is ported in on the fly, so to speak. But I feel like I've finally sort of hit on what is the story here? What is the story that needs to be told? And I've been working with the prototype on the black fabric, but I have envisioned it sort of as a double-sided quilt. So Emma, if you click to the next slide, you can see the backside, which is white. And I really wanted the ties because they really do evoke that history of traditional sort of tied quilts. So eventually, now that I've got the prototype down, my next steps, I've got the materials ordered for the full-size quilt, and we'll start undertaking the quilting as a whole. I'm glad they call it the 2026 Scholars because it'll probably take me till the end of the year to finish this quilt. Um, and then that's about it. Next, Emma, I just want to say thanks. Thank you to everyone, and happy to take questions. If you want to see progress on the next steps on the quilt, the best place to follow me is on Instagram.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel. We will put in a link where people can follow up. I cannot wait to see how this evolves. I started working for the Quilt Alliance in 2012. It was my first job out of college, and the database didn't exist. And so over that whole period of time, I feel like we've been slowly moving things in there, and it's something that changes every day. So it's pretty cool that it's this document, and it's going to be a point in time snapshot. And it's something theoretically like this is a quilt that you could work on forever because I hope that we'll continue to add and change this metadata. But to see something that I've worked pretty hard on and is still evolving. But it's also a story about nonprofits and volunteer work and like what little bits of information are present and absent as we all work together to fill in this Quilt Alliance database. So yeah, this is super exciting. Thank you so much. I can't
Thank
wait to
you.
see how it evolves and hear about your thoughts. Um, okay, yes, please put any questions you have about any of our speakers in the Q&A box, and we'll definitely chat in just a little bit. I'm going to invite our third scholar here, Angelika Strohmayer, to join us. And let's see, let me get my video all set up here. Sorry about this, folks. A lot of windows involved in Zoom Textile Talks here. Fantastic. There you are. Hello. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I will just click here and you can get started.
Lovely. Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to be talking on behalf of a larger group of people, a larger group of women, who we have called ourselves wildflower women. So this talk will be about co-creating an interactive quilt about women's recovery and blossoming. I'm based in the UK, so I'll give you a little bit of a map of the work. But just to start us off, this project is part of a slightly bigger project around women's recovery in the Northeast, and I'll not go too far into it, but it's been a really nice way of bringing color into it, and you'll see what I mean as the talk goes on. So the project is part of what's called the Festival of Blossoms, which is in the UK a national celebration organized by National Trust. And it's basically a celebration of spring. And our specific project, We Are Wildflower Women, celebrates women's recovery, the blossoming of spring, and the strength and connections that can be built through collective making and quilting in particular, of course. So we were working with a group of women in recovery to co-create an interactive quilt inspired by themes of blossoming and rebirth, as well as history of a very specific property from the National Trust called Seat Indelible Hole, which you can see on the map, is quite far north, up close by Newcastle, and if that means anything to anyone, which is about an hour and a half south from Edinburgh. And of course, also inspired by the Quilt Alliance's Quilters Save Our Stories archive. And throughout the talk, I'll be referring to some of the quotes we discussed as a group, which will also be embedded within our interactive quilt once it's finished. Like Rachel, ours is also not entirely done, but I'll show you some in-progress photos. If you could go to the next slide, please. So throughout the archive, we did several searches of different terms and ended up working with three transcripts more specifically. And the first one I want to talk about is that of Stephanie Grissom, who was interviewed by Karen Busgrave. And the interview is about her quilt titled American Renaissance. So she learned to quilt later in life with influence from her sister and art quilts, and she finds inspiration in her personal life, her emotions, and social observations. So she creates pieces based on these quite personal situations and uses simple methods of quilt making as symbols to create quilts representing hope, rebirth, and change in politics. And in her interview, one of the things she says is, in response to the question, what do you think makes an artistically powerful quilt? She says, sometimes it's the quilt, and sometimes it's the story behind the quilt, and sometimes it's the quilt artist and their story. So our quilt, Wildflower Women quilt, is filled to the brim with stories. The stories of Sophia Ann Delaval, and the stories of the women that were told while we were cutting out the fabrics, arranging flowers into our quilt top, or embellishing the quilt. We will also be embedding QR codes within the quilt, which allow for the stories we're telling on our project website to be a part of the quilt as well as mini quilts that will be in different pockets throughout the quilt, hidden in the flowers to tell new stories every time the quilt is interacted with, inspired by the QSOS archive, by the people who interact with it. So, oh, thank you. The project overall was based on 6 sessions of co-creative activities to explore topics of blossoming in nature and in recovery through the process of making this interactive quilt inspired by these quotes. So the process itself was a really joyful one, even when the stories that we told while making it brought together really varied experiences and emotions. And the women who made this quilt were in recovery from addictions and have talked about how it can be quite exposing to sit down and produce something that's just you without substances. So if you click again, you'll see that the work in this project I'm talking about was made by women in recovery, as well as a handful, 4 fine art students from Northumbria University. We also involved a PhD student who's focusing on feminist care ethics, historians at National Trust, and a craft researcher, which is me. So the picture here you can see is a picture out from the main entrance of Seton Delaval Hall. You see, it was a really beautiful day when I took this picture, but you can see the nature there. And what you can't see around the corner is there's just huge amounts of flowers and blossoms. And if you click next, you'll see a picture of the hall from the outside. So the National Trust is Europe's largest conservation charity, founded in 1895. And the point is to protect nature, beauty, and history across the UK. Seton Delaval Hall, which is this particular building and the estate that surrounds it, was built between 1718 and 1728, and the house and the surrounding landscape are in keeping with the Georgian style of the time period. Um, and it looks very formal, and the times were very formal. But this particular site also has a story of theatricality and mischief. The family that lived there kind of threw these quite lavish parties, and also had this kind of air of mischief around them. They played a lot of tricks on people. So you can imagine this very kind of strict Georgian household, but also with this like mischief behind it. So that's the kind of environment that Sophia Ann Delaval lived. If you click next, you'll see 2 paintings of her. So she was born in 1755 and died in 1793, so not a very long life, which we'll get into a little bit. She's the second daughter of John Lord Delaval, who built the hall. So she was really there kind of as it was, after it had been built, but kind of as it was still quite young. So we started our project with the first oil painting of her, which is the one on the right, which was made in the 1770 by William Bell. And we will be creating a mini quilt of this painting with the second fantasy portrait, which you can see on the left-hand side, painted by Edward Alcock, somewhere between 1775 and 1778, to create a center of our medallion quilt, which will also be made up of raw edge applique flowers cut out of various fabrics designed by the Café Facet collective, which I personally was very excited about because I'd been meaning to use their collection for a long time. So the next slide will be another quote from the Quilters Save Our Stories archive. This one by Rosa Angulo. about her quilt titled Hope. So this was a quote that we talked about quite a lot in the group. And Angulo makes her quilts inspired by her personal development and recovery. The photo that you see of her quilt is her first quilt, and it talks a lot about her life experiences, the challenges and aspirations that she had. So she uses quilting not only as an art form, but also as a process of healing from the emotional pain of being separated from her loved ones as she was making this quilt. So it's made up of various patches and sections that convey various phases of her life, and stitching that symbolizes her strength and the image of an eagle that you can see there in black as a signifier of freedom. And ultimately, Angulo's quilt conveys her transformation through personal discovery. And it reads out hope. I always have hope. So we discussed in our group the relationships between creativity and hope quite a lot. And one of the women reflected on the deeper work that becomes possible when collaging fabrics together to create quilts, drawing on her experiences in the group. And she said, because it is fearful, isn't it? It's terrifying to do it in case you don't get it right. To which others then added that being creative together requires a certain vulnerability to do this creative work, which some of the other women found quite challenging, as one said, to know what we were all at the end going to have something, and that mine might not look as good as everybody else's. To which one of the other women responded then, but that's about the work, isn't it? That you're doing on yourself. It's about going, actually, I'm going to do it anyway, even though it feels a little bit difficult. And then another kind of added to finish off the section, you don't even realize the work you're doing, which is kind of the whole one of the big points of this project. So that then brings us back to Sophia Ann Delaval's story and why that is so important. So if you click on the next slide, we've produced this, well, the fine arts students produced this booklet about Sophia Ann Delaval's story, and I'll not go into too much detail of it. But essentially, when she was 21, during the Georgian period, she went off to Europe to the Grand Tour to go visit places, learn things. And when she returned pregnant, unmarried, later giving birth to a boy called Henry. After about a year, she returned back to France for a year this time, and then came back married this time to a man called John Jardis. She had supposedly married him, but that wedding was not recognized by her family. So she remarried him in England on the 6th of February, 1780. This man, John Jadis, did not fit in with the Seton Delaval whole lot. And there was a lot of quarreling, for example, with his brother-in-law. And it was also, there's a lot of knowledge about Sophia and stories from letters that her and her father were exchanging while she was away and living in London, which she moved to after she came back from Europe. Um, and the way we kind of talk about it is that she endured her husband for 6 years. That relationship was not a happy one necessarily. There are some kind of notions of her potentially having experienced some form of violence. But we also know that during this time when she was living in London, she was visiting her doctors who was prescribing her quite high dosages of opiates. So we can kind of piece together that Sophia Ann, coming from this great house, was living with an addiction to opiates and away from her son, who was being brought up by his grandmother up in Seton Delaval Hall. So a lot of the women that we were working with really could resonate with this story because they had had some similar experiences. Um, and that's why she's the center of our quilt. So to move on to the next quote, which is again back from the archive, Jerry Riggs is another quilter whose story we worked with. Um, and we worked with her story because her quilts are influenced by her personal experiences, especially sickness and recovery from illness. So while Sophia Ann Delaval, as far as we know, never managed, she died at a very young age, living with her addictions. Um, we kind of see Jerry Riggs here as using quilting as a way of recovering from an illness, using really bright colors, geometric shapes, and symbols like spirals indicating growth and transformation. So we really wanted to take inspiration from that kind of hopeful look there. And in her interview, she talks about mandala quilts in particular, trying to heal herself by making these mandalas, because at the time she was really into centered mandalas, circular, kaleidoscopic kind of quilts, as a validation for what she'd been experiencing. And this quote kind of brought a lot of emotion into our group. One woman particularly saying, I feel emotional and feel I'm starting to well up, continuing to talk about her own experiences with especially her grandson, who she was now looking after, talking about wanting to get him more involved in creative activities like the ones that we were working on as a group. So if you click to the next slide, you'll start to see some of the work that we've been working on to celebrate recovery and to celebrate the women and the joys and the hope and the kind of community that we were able to build throughout this project. Here you can see some process of what we've been doing. We've had all of our 6 sessions now. We had the last one today in the morning, laying flower mandalas, which looked absolutely phenomenal. I sadly wasn't able to be there, but it looked phenomenal. And as you can see, we were using lots of colorful flowers, the painting of Sophia Ann in the middle, and then the yellow piece of paper you can see there is quotes from the QSOS archive, like the ones I've been presenting throughout this talk. And as you can see in the last picture on the bottom right, there's a little bit of a tassel, which I'm wearing today, as a kind of representation of the women also being part of this talk, and not just me. So if you click next, we'll go back to Jerry Riggs's quotes, where she talks about quilting being a sense of daring, a sense of wanting to try something different, of wanting your own individual vision that you want to create, which really strongly resonated with the women, who were talking about kind of sometimes the creative activities being the first point where they were able to really speak in a language that they felt represented them, or even just being able to speak after having kept their voices down for a long time. Similarly, for Riggs, the quilt ended up being a sort of symbolic piece for her of a period of her life where a lot of transitions were happening, which again really resonated with a lot of the women that we were working with, who then went on to talk about how in a rehab center, sometimes it's the first time that women are invited to be creative, to engage with their work. And again, talking about all the wider work that's happening when engaging with creative activities. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see some pictures of the quilt as we're going along with it. So it is a bit of a work in progress, but with this, you can kind of see where we're up to. So it's going to be interactive, and it's actually going to be 9 quilts in one. As you can see there, the photo of Sophia, the painting of Sophia and Delaval Hall, and then the fantasy painting on the back. There's a poem written by one of the women that she brought to the group, that's kind of central under Sophia and Delaval's story. And you can see the medallion quilt in the background, which is quite a traditional quilt for the time period, actually, of the 1700s in England, covered with these flowers, this blossoming, this creativity from the women. And then if you click next again, you'll see an image of what those mini quilts with the quotes will look like in the end. At the moment, they're paper, but they will all be mini quilts of the quotes, looking like the quotes that we've been talking about throughout the presentation. And then if you go to the last slide, please. It's just, I think it's really important to hear stories of women, whether that is stories from the 1700s or stories from today or stories from the quilting archives. Time and time again, we hear that women in recovery or women who are accessing support services don't engage, or that they have to want the help. But as a group, we are saying that that's just not good enough. And our quilt is a celebration of this. It highlights that women will engage in recovery support that is developed with and by them, and engage in support that is creative and adapted to their needs, and that gives space for them to learn new things with and from one another. So the tassel, this was, wasn't originally brought by me, it was brought by one of the women, and the kind of whole process of the project has been a yes, and let's figure this out, let's work on this together. So ultimately, our quilt is a celebration of recovery, of color, of being loud and taking up space. It's a celebration of community and of literally making hope together. So we want to share this with others through talks like this, but also through 2 other main ways. The quilt will be finished somehow next week, as we've got an exhibition at the Hall of the project and the quilt starting next Friday. And then we're also quietly behind the scenes working on a wildflower women starter kit that will have this image as the fabric and the QSOS quilts also embedded within the quilt so others can explore the archive and the archives that in the parts that the women found really important and create their own projects and their own thoughts and kind of continue the conversation about the archive and recovery and crafting and hope and being together. And thank you very much. I'm sorry if I went over. Um,
No, that
thank you.
was fantastic. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. Not at all. I'm so inspired by the way that these QSOS interviews have resonance, kind of even for just around the world and for all different kinds of folks. I really appreciate that. Um, we have a few minutes, and I would love to invite all three scholars to join me if you don't mind. And we can just chat for a second if you don't mind. And yeah, I just want to first thank you so much for your work and tell everyone to please follow up. We will share some links in the chat. Each of you, if you want to put a link to find out more about yourself in the chat, you're welcome to do that, and I will do that as well. And also, if you're watching this recording, we'll add it to the YouTube description. And I want to ask a couple of folks, please add extra questions. We have one for Jaleesa, which we'll go back to in just a second. But I'm curious, when you saw the call for entries, QSOS is an oral history project, which is like a very particular kind of medium, right? Like it's not just a journalistic interview. Um, I'm curious what was appealing to you about it? Like what is it about, making art or making research inspired particularly by that kind of project? Or maybe you're just like, this sounds fun and I want to do a quilt thing. That's fine too. But
I think it was that. It sounded fun and I wanted to do a quilt thing. No, I this was an opportunity for me to get out of a very sort of academic approach to working with oral history. So I've collected oral histories, I've studied them, but this time I got to do it in a way that allowed me to think about stories in a different way and think about focusing on that keyword of mountains, and also looked up highlands and other things in the repository, and then think about that visually and what that would look like in a visual way versus like writing a paper about it. And so that was what really drew me to the idea, is it seemed quite open and creative and interpretive, and that's what I was looking to do.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely on the this looks fun side of things. And I think I was a little bit naive, right? Like I know about oral histories and I know what they are. And, looking back now from a reflective standpoint, it's like, duh, they're gonna wander all over. They're not gonna have consistent sort of data and talk about the same things in the way that I was sort of thinking about my project originally. So in that way, it's kind of awesome because it steered my project in a direction that I'm quite happy with at this point, but very different than I think I was originally thinking when I proposed. And, had I sat down and really thought the nature of an oral history is such that it's going to mess with me, I probably still would have done it anyway because it sounded fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Oral histories really do. They have a way of, they're like a little bit untamed, which is, I think, or the best ones are, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely had a similar, like, I'd seen the scholar program for a while and had always missed the deadlines. And then, um, and I love making quilts with other people. So I was like, why not link that up with other oral histories and kind of embed those in fun ways as well. So it was definitely also this would be lovely and really fun and really wonderful to do.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I mean, all three of your projects are so different, but all kind of rooted in that like personal, individual, but also collective, which I think is really, really neat. And I will say for anyone else who's like seeing this and thinking it sounds fun, you don't have to wait for a call to entries. The QSOS interviews are like available. You can use them for inspiration. You can just use them for entertainment as you so. All three of our panelists happen to be doctors, but you don't need a doctorate or a PhD to do any of this. But yeah, I encourage you definitely to check it out and see what might spark a little project for you and send it to us. We'd love to see it. We did have a question from Linda that I think this is related to your talk, Jaleesa, that says, can we see a larger image of the woman with green pieces in the background? And I'm going to go to that slide and maybe you can tell us. I'm going to see if I can find that. Do you know? Yes, it's this little square here. Does this have a story?
It does have a story. I put that in as like a little nugget because it's another project that I'm working on. So I've been working in archives and learning about different Black people in Kentucky. And so this is Mary Britton, who was one of the first Black female doctors in Kentucky. And she went to Berea College. And so her work is in the archive. And so I've been playing with different quilting ideas and just thinking about textiles with that. So I wanted to put it there because she's always watching over me when I'm in my studio. So I felt like she should be part of the presentation.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that she was included and that somebody eagle-eyed. I clocked that too. I was like, "Who's that?" So yeah, we'll have to tune in, and we'll share a link again to where you can kind of see future work. So yeah, I think that might be all that we have time for. If there's any other questions, squeak them in now. And feel free to get in touch, I think, with any of our scholars. Are you all okay with that? Awesome. You can find them on the internet and we'll share links as well. I will do a couple more reminders and thank you again to the three of you. This has been really, really fantastic and inspiring. And I hope this plants a little seed for everyone about using this amazing wealth of knowledge. And you've given us such beautiful examples. So thank you. So yeah, you can find the interviews at qsos.quiltalliance.org. You can join us for the next Textile Talk, which is next week, presented by Sakwa, and it'll be Jim Arendt, Denim and Persistence in Difficult Times. And I will play our little sponsor video, and I hope we'll see you all soon. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us.